Good evening, everybody. It is Tuesday, January 31st, 2023, and this is a meeting of the advisory committee. I wanted to, again, thank our school committee representatives for accommodating our cancellation last week and being here tonight. So to kind of just be respectful of your time, since you're the first item on our agenda, I wanted to basically spend the next approximately 20 minutes. I'll spend maybe 8 or so minutes running through some slides, which poor Amy Cohen has already seen. So you can kind of just tune out for this part if you want. And then we'll just open it up to kind of like a general discussion, if that sounds good to everybody. Okay, great. Just give me 1 second. All right, so hopefully you all can see these slides. And really our goal for this presentation is to just give a little bit more insight into how the advisory committee approaches budgeting, and especially with respect to the impact that any education assessment from the Neshoba Regional School District kind of affects our other decision making. So really quickly, I thought I would actually just start with a revenue snapshot for the regional school district. This is using the current fiscal year's numbers, where you all had a voted budget last year of $62.2 million. Your revenue to support that $62 million budget comes mostly from the member towns, 50 million. And then other revenue, things like Chapter 70 aid, comes in at about 12. So 80% of your total revenue is coming directly from Bolton, Lancaster, and Stowe. So then I figured, of course, it's helpful to understand where those sources can get their revenue, their underlying revenue. So Bolton, like Lancaster and Stowe, really has just a handful of revenue sources. So we've got our taxes, and for that number that you're looking at, the current fiscal year FY23, it's 25.2 million levied in taxes. The vast majority of that, around 94%, is actually residential property taxes. And then we have a smaller amount, commercial, industrial, and personal property. Basically, the bulk of it is, your homeowner's property tax bill. We have a little bit of state revenue, and the biggest component of that is our unrestricted general government aid, which is like UGA. You might have heard that term before. We have some local receipts, roughly 1.6 million of those. And then we do from time to time use free cash for our operating budget, but ideally we're trying to reserve free cash for capital projects. So unlike the district, the member towns have a direct constraint by the Massachusetts General Law Proposition 2.5. And the way that works out is Prop 2.5 has two components. There's a levy ceiling, which is basically that establishes the total ceiling on the amount that any town can tax. And that's based, the rule is you can't tax more than 2.5% of the total, we call it equalized valuation of the town. So in Bolton, our equalized valuation is like $1.3 billion. So 2.5% of that is 32.7 million. So that's our levy ceiling. We can't go above that. Then there's the levy limit, which is a limit that gets adjusted year to year. And that says we can't increase our total tax levy in any given year by more than 2.5% of the prior year. So this makes up sort of our hardwired revenue constraints. And just to get a sense of how we start building our budget for the current fiscal year, FY24, we start with last year's levy limit. And this number can be found on like the state's website. It's not a number we make up. It's just, that's what the number is, 24 million for the current fiscal year. Then we get to add in a 2.5% increase. So we get 600,000 in Prop 2.5, call it new revenue. Then we add in estimated new growth. And that's a number that we get in consultation with our Board of Assessors. And you can think of it as basically the taxes that can be levied on new construction in town. It is not like the taxes on the increased value of your property. That's just determined. That's basically, that speaks to how much your tax bill is and what the tax rate is. But this new growth is for new construction. So we're estimating for the current fiscal year 200,000. And it adds up to our new levy limit, which is 24.8 million. Just wanted to call out these two numbers. So this roughly $800,000 you can think of as our pot of new revenue for the town of Bolton to be able to allocate in the upcoming budget. Okay, so the impact of the district's assessment. And again, I said this last Thursday with the select board. I know that the district is still working on its budget and that the numbers that it released at the January 8th budget workshop are preliminary, but I did want to just illustrate how different increases in the assessment impact Bolton. So this was our assessment for the current fiscal year, 16.9 million. If that assessment increases 3% in FY24, then basically we need to come up with $500,000 more for our assessment. If it goes up by 4%, it's 678,000. If it goes up 5%, it's 850,000 increase. And then if it increases the 6.04% that was in the budget workshop slides, and again, I know that that's hopefully going to change, then we would need to find an additional $1 million just for our assessment. Rule of thumb is that every 0.5% increase in the assessment is about an $85,000 increase in expense for us. And just to illustrate visually, if you look at this chart, the blue bar is that $800,000 of new revenue, Prop 2.5 plus new growth. And then the orange bar shows how much of that $800,000 would be consumed just by an assessment increase. And so you can see down at the very bottom, if the assessment were to go up 6%, not only would we have to use all of that $800,000, but we'd have to come up with even more. And so it basically equates to, finding over $200,000 in our current budget to cut from the town side of things, which, as you can imagine, would be incredibly difficult for us to do. Even a 5% assessment increase, we'd have to find $50,000 in cuts for town services. So, this has been a challenging dynamic because education has been putting the squeeze on the town's ability to spend in other areas. So going back over time, in FY 2007, the Neshoba assessment was 59% of our operating budget. And as of FY 22, it was almost 63%. At the same time that the assessment is increasing, we have demographic and population trends that are kind of in a different direction. So in absolute and relative terms, our student population has decreased over that time period. So you can see, went from 6% of people 5 years and under to 4%. And for our 55 plus population, that has really ballooned over the past, let's call it decade and a half. And so, while I don't want to suggest that, we have to sit here and say for every tax dollar, we're dividing it up evenly between all the age groups, it's just a reality that we now have a pretty sizable senior 55 plus population who are rightfully, needing services and asking for services. But we, as you can imagine, we just don't really have the capacity at this point to take on new initiatives. And then this chart, again, I don't know if I mentioned, I definitely did on Thursday. All this data comes from our town clerk's office because they do an annual census. You probably actually just got your census in the mail last week. And so all of these figures were compiled by them, and you can see that the 5 to 19 year age group has been going down. Just there was a slight uptick recently, but it's still lower than it was in 2008. So I'll stop sharing my screen now, and I would invite our school committee reps to unmute themselves and ask questions. I just thought it was important to get this baseline of information out, so you could understand why we're not just trying to be like thorns in your side. It's a real challenge for us, and for the other budget decision makers in town.
Thank you for the presentation. I don't know if Mike or Amy want to start off, but I just wanted to start by saying thank you. That presentation is very illustrative and educational, but I have questions. I don't know if...
No, Amy, that's okay.
Okay. So one of my questions, Brian, was about the slide that talks about NRSD as the percent of Bolton's operating budget.
Mm-hmm. I can pull that back up. This one?
Yeah. So when I looked at this, I think I kind of come to a different conclusion than what you were presenting. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, because to me, this looks like over 14 years, the percentage of the school budget as a percentage of the town's whole budget has only increased by 3%. And I think when in the title of your slide was framing it differently in that we are crowding out the town's ability to spend. So I feel like I'm missing something when I look at this. Would you be able to explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. And I think that's a really great question, because it's probably not obvious, but so in our experience, the increase over a time period where notably the student population is decreasing, means that where you might have expected the assessment to basically keep pace with all other town service growth, it's actually grown faster than all of our other spending. So I think what we would have liked to see is an FY22 number that was virtually no change, because the slice of the pie is already so big for education that even a 3% increase, like you saw in a slide earlier, it's like tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars, where in our budget, we don't, like, that's an entire department for some of our departments, or it's the difference between, can we fund a parks and recreation coordinator for the first time or not? So it does, yeah, it does affect us quite a bit.
Okay, I think when you explain it in those terms, I kind of understand why you were framing it that way.
Yep.
I have other questions, but I'm going to see if Mike or Amy want to jump in so I don't dominate too much time up front here.
Yes, I had some questions. So I know that many of the costs in the district have gone up quite a bit. Like, I know our special education funding is going up 14%. We've had a lot higher fuel costs. So things have gone up that are outside just a standard year. And I think that, I guess what I'm wondering is, how is like revenue in the town working with that? Because like some years you're going to have things where it's going to be more expensive. And if our revenue really stays the same, how are we addressing that in the town? Because I think it's not just a discussion of what the cost is, but like, are we adjusting over time for how things are going to go up in terms of also increasing our revenue? And that doesn't necessarily mean through just taxes in the town, because I mean, I'm a taxpayer myself. I'm not, I don't want to sign up for really high taxes. Like, that's a concern for me as well. I'm a resident. But I'm also wondering then, how are we balancing that with other revenue? Because there are going to be times when things are going to be more expensive, and we have to kind of adjust around that.
Sure. No, that's a great question. Bolton and I think Stowe and Lancaster are in a challenging spot because we all have the vast majority of our revenues coming from property taxes. So other revenue sources that could be out there. So state revenue, Bolton gets virtually none, and that won't change, at least as far as we know. There's not really much that we can do about that, although it'll be great if the current governor, the new governor, decides to try to keep increases of unrestricted general government aid at the level that the Baker administration had, because that was helpful. Be great if it was even higher. Other things that we have done in the past, we implemented the local meals tax, which some of that is a burden on Bolton residents, but a lot of it is for people visiting Bolton and buying meals here. And then there's, I guess, an industrial and commercial development. And so I know, and actually the select board would probably be able to speak on this even better than I could, but we're in the works on a cannabis project down Main Street, which could bring some substantial additional revenue to the town. And there are things like that we're trying to take advantage of, but there aren't a ton of new revenue sources that are untapped in the town as is.
Okay, I guess I'm just wondering, like, if that's something that we're trying to brainstorm about, because I feel like that is going to continue to be an issue into the future. And I know that there's been some resistance to changing that in the town, some of the ideas that you guys have come up with. But I also wonder if you framed the discussion at the town meeting around, like, if we don't bring in those types of revenues, here's the implications that it's now going to have on, like, the ability to fund parts of our budget. Because I don't really remember that discussion at the end of the year when we're talking about, like, town meeting and people are trying to vote on different things that maybe other revenue sources. I don't necessarily remember that conversation. Is that a conversation that we're trying to bring out to the full town so they kind of understand those implications?
Yeah, I mean, the one that I remember the best is we had a pretty spirited debate about the local meals tax, which, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, Anachka could correct me. I think we probably have seen, putting the pandemic aside, 60 to 80 grand of revenue per year.
That sounds right.
Which, I mean, it's not a ton, but it's meaningful. But that, like, I don't know if you were at that town meeting, but there were some people that were, like, not thrilled about that. It did ultimately pass. And we definitely made the case that you need to vote in favor of this because we need to be able to support spending on our town services. So we did sort of quantify it in that way.
Okay.
Brian, if I could jump in,
Sure.
and maybe address Amy Vessel. To Brian's point, there aren't many additional revenue sources that we can tap. I mean, Brian talked about the meals tax, which brings in a small amount of money and not much. There isn't much commercial land in town, so we had estimated a number of years back. We had this academic discussion. We would need 11 new international golf courses to drop the tax rate by $1. I mean, that's a substantial amount of new business that we just can't fit in town. So there are no silver bullets relative to finding new revenue sources. There might be some incremental. As Brian mentioned, we might have a cannabis manufacturing plant at 58 Main Street, which might bring in some additional revenue. There might be one or two more businesses, but nothing to the extent that's going to support any substantial growth. There were missed opportunities where we could have had the state take over certain things to provide some revenue. We had the Community Preservation Act, which we could have participated in years ago, which the town decided not to participate in. So we've had some missed opportunities, but there really isn't, and there are very, very few opportunities for new revenue growth, and certainly nothing substantial. We might get a few additional businesses in town, but that revenue from taxes, is not going to be substantial at all. So unfortunately, wishing that we could increase the revenue stream, it's just not there. And certainly if we could have done it, we would have done it years ago. And it's just not really possible.
Go ahead, Mike.
Sure. Well, thank you. And I'm going to just echo what Amy said. Thank you for inviting us. It's sort of educational in a lot of ways. And also, that this is a volunteer board. I appreciate all of your efforts. Sometimes it feels like that gets lost in the shuffle of all of these conversations. So I had a couple questions. I can defer the second one or the third one. But Amy Vessel's actually addressed what I was going to say. If there aren't additional revenue sources available, and the school district budget rises at a reasonable rate, right? So I just did some math over the past, I think something like 5 to 10 years. It's gone up on average by about 3.5%, which is pretty typical for comparable districts. Do we have a revenue problem in Bolton? Do we have a problem with raising enough revenue to fund a reasonably sized district budget that isn't just an affordable product, but also is a product that offers growth, right? Educational growth, I guess. So I guess that's my question. Do we have a revenue problem? It sounds as if we do. Mr. Wysocki and Brian, you kind of pointed out that our options are limited and there's always lots of pushback. And I can appreciate that because I've been to these meetings, but I guess I'm wondering what your thoughts on that are, because it sounds, on the one hand, we can attribute this position that we're in to a district budget. On the other hand, it does sound like we have issues generating and sustaining revenue in town, which ultimately redirects attention to, the big consumer of the budget, which is, of course, the district budget. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, it's not a revenue problem. The revenue is what the revenue is. I mean, 94% of what we take in is coming from residents. We don't have a lot of business in town. The voters have voted not to want to have a lot of business in town. There isn't enough commercial space to generate significant increases in revenue. I mean, to your point, Mike, I mean, yes, I mean, the school budget's gone up, 3% or 4% or whatever, but Superintendent Downing presented something not that long ago where he showed a chart from FY 17 or 18 to now. And the school budget has gone up by $13 million over that period. And $13 million is half of what our entire town budget is. And over a 7-year period, it has gone up $13 million. And we've had to find some way to fund that. So, I guess it's all from perspective, whether you say it's 3 or 4% a year, but in reality, it's a significant amount of money that goes up. As Brian pointed out earlier, I mean, we have about 800 grand of new revenue that we can apply. And, currently with the first version of the school budget, it's over $1 million. So we're already 200 and some odd $1,000 in the hole, and we'd have to find some place for that. And there's really no place to find it other than cutting back. So I wouldn't call it, it's a revenue challenge. It's not a revenue problem. There just aren't sources of revenue that we can bring in. The state doesn't allow a lot of things for us to do. We've missed some opportunities in the past, and we have to deal with it. I don't know how other way to put it. I
I'll
don't think we're gonna find any new revenue sources to solve this particular problem in the short term.
I'll just add a little something to that, which is, and I'm going to use a word that nobody likes to use, but it's like the override word. So I know, Mike, you were saying, does Bolton have a revenue problem? So if we all just assume that there are not a whole bunch of untapped revenue sources out there, we could look to the revenue source that we have, which is like our property taxes. And if we don't have enough of that source in one given year, the solution or the option that is there for an override. So that would obviously provide more revenue. But my only comment, and I'll say this, I guess, as an individual, because I don't know if everybody on the committee feels the same way. My feeling on an override is that I think the voters in the town of Bolton, and maybe in Stowe and Lancaster, would want to basically make sure that every government entity that is spending their money has tried to squeeze change out of a penny before asking for an override. And so, sitting on the town side of things where I feel pretty confident that we could make that showing, at least for town stuff, if we needed to. And so I think maybe the challenge or the question for the school committee is, do you feel like you would be able to demonstrate to the residents that the school committee has also squeezed change out of a penny when it comes to the school budget? I think that's sort of the political challenge that you would face in an override.
Well, I think I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody. Amy Square, do you guys want to chime in at all?
Well, I mean, I feel like when I listened to the participating in the budget discussions this year on the school committee, to date, I think from my point of view, and I'll speak as an individual school committee member as well, there has been an effort to find efficiencies within our existing framework, meaning our existing staffing levels, classroom space, to free up money that could be used to spend towards some of the strategic goals that we've identified this year. So I guess from my point of view, the budget that's presented is I'm not gonna say it's squeezing change out of a penny, but I feel like it's already been viewed through the lens of trying to meet our strategic objectives in a way that finds efficiencies through looking at class sizes and FTE levels for our staff and enrollment and a lot of other metrics. I'm trying to think of an example without getting too specific, but the budget that has been presented is not one that is proposing a new program or anything other than salary raises and cost of living adjustments. Any new position that has been floated is coming out of money that came from finding efficiencies within current staffing levels. And Mike is more eloquent than me, so maybe he can say what I'm trying to say better than what I'm saying, but I guess from my point of view, I don't view the school district's budget as out of line with any other kind of salary increases that would help us remain competitive as a school district, and offer an education to the students that makes it so that people want to stay in our town and move to our town. So.
I agree. I think that, looking at what's driving the decisions, Superintendent Downing has done surveys. He's gotten feedback from people in the communities. He has, he has the NEASC accreditation, which, schools this comes up every 10 years or whatever, and you have to show progress towards the things that they felt like your school needed to work on. And so the strategic plan is addressing those concerns. It's not like, I don't feel like he's adding things that are outside of that. I mean, it's all of the things that he's adding is not, I don't know. I don't see it as extra. I mean, it's addressing those concerns that the school has to look at and adjust for. Because I know at the end of the 10 years, they have to show they've made progress in those areas for NEASC, because we do that at my school. Every school has that. So I feel like where, I feel like the budget is not, I guess I don't see it as excessive. I see it as meeting the strategic goals, which is what we're looking for it to do. I understand that there's cost to that, but to say that it's out of control or whatever, I don't see it in that way.
Brian, I just want to make sure that we're, in having these conversations, we're still staying on agenda. Are we still okay to be talking about this in this manner?
Yeah, I mean, we should wrap up in another minute or two, but thanks for asking that, Mike.
Okay, I would like to add one more thing. In these conversations, and we've had these over the past several months, if not longer, 6 months or even a year, there seems to be a tension that has yet to be resolved. And the tension exists between a narrative that for whatever reason, that there's this perception, and I don't know who has the perception and who is, doesn't endorse the perception that the district budget is inflated or under scrutinized or under evaluated. And again, this goes back to your presentation and what our constraints are as a town, and our problem being able to generate revenue. And then, of course, on our side, you heard from Amy, and Amy saying that we are beholden to so many different things as a district. We're beholden to residents whose kids are going to school. And, as Amy said, the strategic plan, and DESE audited us, and we have to show growth towards these recommendations. And so we have lots of ways in which the budget is sort of being pulled and defined. So the tension exists there between those two narratives. And fundamentally, and I think I don't want to speak for Amy, but fundamentally, I think we are trying to problem solve. And I guess I'm going to ask just a question: how do we problem solve for this? Because up to now, it feels as if we're talking a lot about the problems, but we're not really talking about the solutions, right? So I'm a very collaborative person. I am interested in partnership. I am not interested in focusing exclusively on problems. If there's a problem, especially coming from the town that I represent, I want to work collaboratively in order to solve this so that all parties are maybe not happy, but at least satisfied. And so I want the conversation to be more about partnership and an invitation to collaborate, rather than just here is where we are and here's where we are, and we can't bridge those worlds. I just don't believe that there isn't something that we can't collaboratively do to solve and address this issue, so that we can get to a place where the town feels comfortable with the district budget, our select board feels comfortable with the district budget, and the school committee representatives who ultimately own the budget once they vote for it feel comfortable with that budget. So I'm not asking a question that requires an answer. I guess I'm just making a statement that I'm really interested in relieving the tension that exists because it's palpable. And I want it to be a productive endeavor rather than a something that's stagnant and intractable.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And we feel the same way. And it actually is a good segue to the point that I wanted to close on, which I think is maybe a suggestion for how this can become more productive. The reason why I wanted to walk through how the town has to build its budget and to focus on what I call our hardwired constraints is because I think historically the district has just started building its budget through a different process. So instead of starting with, okay, 80% of our revenue comes from towns, those towns are subject to Prop 2.5. So before we even start building our budget, we should just take our 80% revenue and increase that 2.5% and then see what we can do with it. Like, I'm not saying that if you were to do that this year, it would solve the problem going back in time. But I think if there had been years and years of kind of approaching your budgeting from the back end and like assuming those constraints in, it would have produced a situation where there were less tension now. Because what happens now is that the school district develops its budget and then sort of says, well, the towns will figure it out. The towns will figure out how to give us the assessment, even if it's a 3 or 4 or 5%. And so my ask would be, you consider to try to do that Prop 2.5 calculation within your own planning, and to not assume that the member towns have more than 2.5% to give. And then, you know, the member towns in the district can have a conversation about, okay, well, what about new growth? And is there some unofficial revenue sharing conversation that we can have with any new growth or new revenues? But I think that process point that I just made would help with reducing some of the tension. All right, so we do have a few other departments to meet with tonight, but I did want to thank you all again. I really appreciate you being here. And I know how much hard work you give to your time on the school committee, so thank you for that. And let's keep chatting.
Okay, thanks you for having us. Thanks to everyone.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks. Good night.
Thanks for opening up the dialogue again, Brian. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, have to look at our agenda now. Our next up, we're going to be meeting with Chris Rogers regarding the Board of Health budget.
Evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. Let's this should hopefully be pretty quick and painless.
Yeah,
We'll
shall
start
I
the top at 4:39.
Yep, let me share my screen and just so we're all on the same page. How's that look?
Pretty good.
Okay, take it away.
So let's see, actually, I need you to, where are we?
So
So yeah, there we go, 4:39. Okay, so again, I don't know how new members of advisory we have, but and I'm not sure how much of an explanation you want here, but basically we're required to test wells around the transfer station, which was once upon a time a town dump, has been capped. This is a DEP requirement that we do every year with Joel Frisch with Northeast Geoscience, I believe, out of Clinton. Any questions, comments?
Just one question, Chris, which is, I know several years ago, maybe somebody sent an email or a letter, maybe it was Joel Frisch, just confirming that DEP is still going to require this. I don't know if that's something he does on a regular basis, but I guess it's not so much a question as a comment, just if DEP ever lets us off the hook.
We don't know. And we've been trying to find out, but like a lot of agencies, he's been kind of sad and there aren't as many people there to be. And frankly, for a number of years, we've been trying to get a straight answer on that, which, of course, which doesn't help. But I guess the point we made is that we're not off the hook yet. So until we're told we're off the hook, then we've got to continue on. As a matter of fact, I've got to talk to Kristen tomorrow because I think there's a new person who's kind of managing this at DEP, and they don't have some of the records, which I know we have because we have been doing it every year. So,
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Anybody want to make a motion?
I move we approve the landfill budget.
I'll second it.
Okay, great. I will roll call. Bob,
Aye.
Bill,
aye.
Craig,
Aye.
Greg.
Aye.
I don't see Omid, so I'll say I'm a yes as well. Okay. Moving right along to the 510 Board of Health budget.
Yep. Again, pretty straightforward. I'm going to go line by line. If you just want questions about it specifically.
Hey, Chris,
Yeah,
your connection's terrible.
I'm sorry, honey. It's, why? Because someone else is using up all the bandwidth in the house.
It's funny that the connection got crystal clear for that little marital spat.
Exactly. And I do to him.
So I think given the connection issues, let's just see if people have specific questions, because this is a pretty straightforward. It looks like there's a 7.5% increase in the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health, and that's like a fee, right?
Yes. Yep. They historically we budget, and it's typically a 5% quarterly.
Oh, we lost you there.
What is going on? Nina,
We can, yeah. So you were
It's-
saying you historically budget for 5%.
yes, but they went to 7.5%.
Okay. And then just, I know we haven't talked about it yet, but it looks like that's also true of the purchase of services for the nursing budget. It's that 7.5% increase. Nanachka, I'm just watching your like disapproving looks.
Yes, it did go to 7.5%. And so the
Just me.
Okay. Sorry. You know what? Maybe I'm wondering did we just lose somebody? No, Chris, you're still there, right?
Hey, Chris.
Yeah, Greg.
Suggest
we lose it.
All right. Let me see if anybody has questions. Raise your hand if you have a question for Chris. Not seeing anything.
Oh.
Sorry. Okay. So if you have a question for Chris about the Board of Health budget or the 522 nursing budget, please raise your hand. And if there's no questions, then maybe somebody can make a motion to approve those budgets.
I move we approve the Board of Health and Nursing budgets.
I'll second it.
Okay, roll call. Bob,
Aye.
Craig,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Greg, Greg, I don't know if you can vote on, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep. Okay, great. And I'm a yes as well.
So I will say, Brian, before I know you guys passed this, and this will address.
Nanachka, you're breaking up too, so maybe one of you does need to log off.
We still have that wage adjustment. Can you hear me or not?
No.
We lost you.
One or both of you should turn off your video.
There you go.
Yeah.
That help?
Okay, Nanachka, try saying what you wanted to say.
I was going to say, added the COLA and the wage adjustments to anything yet?
Okay, so basically we're approving subject to those adjustments that will be made at a later date. Yep. Okay. Well, Chris, I'm sorry that we were having connection trouble, but I think you're free to go for the rest of the evening.
Very good.
All
Thank
right,
you so much.
thanks. Okay. Next up, we have a meeting with our Parks and Rec coordinator, and I think we also have the chair of the Parks and Rec Commission. So that would be Lisa Sheppel and Ed Sterling. Hi, good evening.
Hi there.
Yes. Hi. I'm going to get onto a decent webcam.
Great, thank you. So before we get into your budget, I didn't know if there was anything that you wanted to say to kind of preface the discussion, or should we just go through the numbers?
I don't know if Ed has anything to say.
The big increase is to ask for Lisa to go to essentially a full-time position. She's working that now and not getting paid for it. So we're asking for 32 hours, and I believe Don Lowe has approved that. That's probably the major issue for us at the moment. We're also trying to be competitive with swim wages. You probably heard that towns are competing against each other, you know, for work like that, for essentially, you know, young people, teenager help and so on. So we have tried to keep very competitive in the swimming department. And so that rate continues to be reasonably high to try not to lose people and keep the good folks that are with us. Let me get my video. There we go. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so before we go through each line, I did have a couple of quick questions about the wages swimming stuff. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding what was being proposed for this year. Let me just share my screen here.
As I recall, last summer, I think we ran 2 weeks and decided we really didn't need 2 weeks. Lisa, can you confirm that for me?
For swimming lessons, is that what
Yes.
you're talking about?
Yes.
So we used to do 4 weeks, but now we're doing 3 weeks. That was last year, starting at 3 weeks and not 4.
Okay, so but just in terms of the pay adjustment for lifeguards, so it looks like what you're proposing is going from a rate of $16.50 to $17.50. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that's partially to keep pace with the 75-cent minimum wage increase, but also because of the competition you have with other towns. And so this 15,925 is an increase over last year based on that increase in the rate. Now, I just wanted to be sure. It looks like the swim instructor number is being removed, but that's because you plan to pay for that out of the Parks and Rec revolving Fund.
That's correct. When we do the swimming lessons, when they pay for it, they pay and it goes into our revolving. So we're gonna stop paying the swimming instructors out of our revolving account.
Okay, all right. Thanks. I just wanted to make sure that I had those numbers clear.
Yep.
Oh. Okay, so I don't know if Ninotchka is able to chime in here, but I just wanted to know, it looks like in the budget, in the version of the budget that I had from last week, the wages for swimming is budgeted at 15,015, which looks to me like it's the old 60, that's based on a $16.50 rate. So I believe what the proposal is that this should be 15,925.
I think it's going to be 1725. I think that was the consensus with the HR director.
Oh, 1725 for the rate instead of 1750. Is that what you're saying, Ninotchka?
I think so, Lisa. I'm going to double check with Kristen tomorrow.
Yeah, so Ninotchka, do you know if that amount, that 15,000 was based on the 1650 or the 75 cents more?
That's the number we received on November 8th. So when I got the information from Lisa dated November 8th, 15,015 was the number in that spreadsheet.
Is it on the salary backup sheet? Let's see if I have that in my file here.
This was the 5113 wages for swimming. Requested FY 2024.
Oh, yeah. So actually, Ninotchka, it is in there, but we did talk about it after the fact. But it is in there for 1750, which comes out to 15,925 for the fiscal 24. Yeah, from on that salary sheet.
15,925. Okay.
Yeah.
And if it were, to Ninotchka's point, if the rate were 1725 instead of 1750, it would come to 15,697.50.
Okay.
So I guess maybe we just, I need to know what was approved, basically. And Ninotchka, you're saying 1725 was approved?
I thought that's what Kristen said, but I will confer with her tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so then that's kind of I'm gonna plug in 15,697.50 for now.
Okay.
Just for purposes of discussion tonight.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. Then everything else is level funded. So really it's the increase for the Parks and Rec coordinator, and that would be an increase to 32 hours, which was approved by the town administrator and the town treasurer, right?
Right. That's right.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Thanks for bearing with me while we work through that. Does anybody on advisory have questions?
Brian, there's also an electricity increase here, 984.
Yeah, I think that was Ninotchka plugged that in after we had our discussion. So this is based on the formula that we had agreed upon.
I'm sorry, was that 5211 electric line?
Yeah, that looks like more than 25%.
Seeing if I have the electric thing printed out.
Yeah, I see it was allocated at 1650 and the actual was 2106 on the financial sheet from last year in the annual report. So definitely the rates are going up. So these are for the for lighting at the parks and at the town common.
So, Bob, I think what you're seeing is that for electric, what we decided was to increase sorry, I have too many spreadsheets open. FY22 actuals, which would be this, by 25%. So I think
That is 25%.
Okay,
I think that's what it is.
okay.
Good question. Any other questions?
So I just wanted to make sure that, so for my added hours, that it's because of like the programs or more hours that I'm doing with all the programs and everything else that I've added to Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I'm only one on the committee, but I feel that this is very adequately justified based on the actual hours of work that you're doing, and I think that like our town administrator and town treasurer are aware of that, which is why they're supportive of this.
Certainly appreciate it. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess we should have a motion to approve this budget, but we'll just maybe we can just say subject to determining what the town treasurer approved as that lifeguard rate. Because if she did approve 1750, we'll bump this number up to the 15,900 or whatever. And if she just approved this 1725, we'll keep it at 15,698.
Okay.
So is there a motion to approve the total recreation budget subject to that one little potential change?
I move we approve the total recreation budget subject to that potential change.
I second that.
Okay, great. Roll call. Bob,
Aye.
Craig,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
and I'm yes as well. Okay, thank you, Lisa and Ed, for your time tonight. Much appreciated.
We thank you tremendously. That will
Thanks.
help us a lot. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
I know.
Hello, Chief Nelson. How are you?
Good evening, Brian. How are you?
Good. So we ready to dive in, or is there anything you wanted to talk about before I overwhelm everybody's face with a spreadsheet again?
No, I'm thankful we have the opportunity to meet tonight. That there's only, the major increases, contractual wage increases, which if you've already reviewed it, you'll see that the only increases are in the wages. But yeah, wherever you want to start, if you want to start with the easy ones, if you want to do emergency or communications, whichever one you want to
Sure.
start.
Yeah, why don't we? Yeah, we'll start with dispatch. Or is that going to be Dawn Low?
Well, see, I don't have a figure for that, so that's Nanachka and Dawn. So that was 299.
Nachka, you're frozen.
220. Oh, I need a pen.
Can you hear me?
Nope. He can hear you now.
We are voting on that budget tomorrow.
Okay, so we can just do it another time.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So want to start with emergency management 291.
291. So it should still be $3,900 for the Code Red system.
Yep.
No changes there. It should be the same contractual fee continuously from year to year.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve the emergency management budget for $3,900.
I second that.
Okay, roll call. Bob,
Aye.
Craig,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Greg, try one more time.
Aye. Did you
Okay,
get
great. Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
Uh,
Sorry.
And I'm a yes as well. Okay. Public safety building, do you want to do that one first?
Sure, that's a good
Okay.
idea. And by the way, Lorraine is on the
I'm
meeting
here.
too, so.
Can you hear
great.
me?
Yes,
you
we can
hear
hear
me?
you.
Okay, I'm having a little trouble with the video portion, so I can hear everyone.
It's
So, and I can
Nope.
see your spreadsheet, so that's good.
okay, we can hear you, Lorraine,
Okay,
so we're all
good.
set.
No worries, thank you.
Okay, so do you want to just walk us through the public safety building budget?
Sure, I can do that for you. Do you want just each line item?
Yeah, and especially explaining any increases or decreases.
Okay.
And just so that you know,
Mhm.
we the heating and electric numbers,
Yes,
we have made a couple adjustments to those, but we can talk about that. So if those numbers look different from what you've seen last, that's why. Okay, but go ahead.
yeah, this year I level funded our entire budget. I have no major projects planned, and everything is pretty much at its fixed cost, with the exception of the changes in the heat and the electric. Unless you had a specific question within the public safety building.
So when we were looking at the heating and electric costs, we tried to look at it like sort of town-wide. And I put in here your actuals to date halfway through the year. So for heating, you've already used up 71% of your FY23 budget. And we propose to increase your heating budget for FY24 by 25%. So you'll see that 19,375.
Yes.
I think based on your half year run rate so far, 19,375 is probably going to be pretty close if costs stayed the same. So are you comfortable with us using that 19,375 as a budget number for FY24?
My opinion of that is it's based upon your input. So I just level funded as instructed.
Yeah.
Didn't make any calculations or projections of percentage of usage. So
okay.
I think that's where I have nothing to add to that.
So she's actually saying, yes, we agree.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Okay. Now,
Brian,
Yeah.
if
go
I
ahead.
might,
Yep.
on the Parks and Rec budget, the 25% was based on the actual 2022 times 1.25. This one
Right.
it seems to be 2023.
Yeah, so we had I'll pull up that spreadsheet again. We had so our approach for FY24 was that for electric, we were going to increase FY22 actuals by 25%. And then for heating, we were going to increase the FY23 budget by 25%. And for fuel, we were going to increase the FY23 budget by 20%. So we have like three different rules that we're applying across those three different types of energy cost. But that's why there's the difference.
Sure, I was misreading that line. I was thinking about electric when it was actually heating.
But for electric, I mean, I think what I'm seeing is that for this year to date, we're roughly on track with what was budgeted for FY23. And so I guess I would ask the committee, right? So right now what we have, it's a little hard to see with the numbers so small, but right now this number here, this 59,000 is basically a 25% increase of this 47,000. I'm thinking we may want to consider just increasing the 43,000 by 25% because you're not that far off. So I don't know if other people, if folks on the committee want to weigh in there. Bob or.
Yeah, it seems reasonable. When we discussed this a couple weeks ago. The concern was a 50% rate increase that was going to kick in roughly about now, I think. Yeah, it sure seems like just increasing the 23 budget by 25% should get us pretty close.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if we run low, we can deal with it either with a year-end transfer or advisory transfer if necessary. So I think just to see what it looks like.
That's 53,775.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, that's tracking pretty close to the actual, so I think that makes sense.
Okay, great. You know, save us a little bit of budget dollars, I guess. Okay, well then with that, if anybody has any other questions about public safety, we should ask them now, and otherwise I'd entertain a motion to approve that budget.
I had one quick question, either for Lorraine or Chief Nelson. The purchase of services, just so I can get that in the minutes, can you describe what that covers?
Sure, absolutely. Hold on a moment. Let me just pull out my cover sheet here. The purchase of services, that they're pretty much all of our contracts, including the internet, the Wi-Fi here. We have a live scan. We have all the contracts for maintenance. We have our UPS in the attic. That's our backup battery systems. Okay. We have state fees we're required to pay for criminal justice. We have a radio vendor for our tower locations. We have to do annual maintenance, preventive maintenance with those. That's our IT contract with CM Geeks. We have our security system here, our FCC radio licensing, copier leases, body worn cameras, their warranties and maintenance fees. We have our virus protection, which is included, which is separate from the IT contract. And I think that pretty much wraps it for that. I'm just looking at my detailed summary for purchase of services.
Okay, no, that's great.
Yeah.
I just wanted to capture it.
Those are pretty much fixed unless the vendor increases their fees. And then I would make an adjustment based on that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I noticed trash disposal seems to be moving into purchase of services.
Well, for the trash, we changed vendors. We went from Waste Management to BP Trucking, which is the same contractor the highway department uses. And it was what did I write here? It was a $3,840 decrease in the trash based upon the savings from changing companies. Last fiscal year, I asked to move that $3,840 into the services account, and that was to cover a new radio vendor, Beltronics. We added a preventive maintenance. So that kind of, the vendor we had prior, Comtronics, they did not want to support all the portable radios and the preventive maintenance. So we went to a new vendor. And transferring that savings in the trash into the services is where we made that change. And we're able to support Beltronics based upon that. So that's why you see a difference.
Okay.
And the two, yeah. It was a shuffle of the funding there that we talked about last fiscal year also, which gave us a higher balance in services and a lesser expense balance in the trash.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Is there a motion to approve the public safety building budget?
I move we approve the public safety building budget.
I second that.
Okay, roll call. Bob,
Aye.
Craig,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Greg.
Aye. Aye again.
Yeah, and I'm a yes as well. Okay, Great, and I'll make sure Ninotchka has that new electric number. All right,
53,775.
yes, 53,775. Yep. Sorry, guys. All right, police department budget 210.
Yep.
Oh, and I just wanted to note, so the last Thursday, some members of advisory were able to sit in on the town treasurer's presentation to the select board about wage adjustments for non-union positions within the town. And so I believe that her study included the chief's position. And so there may be, likely will be changes to this first line 5102 based on the conversation with the town treasurer. So we don't necessarily have to get into 5102 tonight. And in fact, Ninotchka, I don't know if we should basically approve, like after we go through this budget, if we should approve it or if you would recommend that we wait.
Well, yeah, the only thing I'll add, Brian, is
Yep.
Lorraine and Luke also are going to be
Yep.
in this too. So 5133 is going to change too.
Oh, right. Good point. Yep.
So maybe just skip the wage portion and approve the expenses.
Got it. Okay. All right. So then, but can you talk us through the adjustments in wages and overtime? For the union folks?
Sure. Did you want to go ahead, Lorraine? You want
Oh,
me
I'm
to just-
sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I
It's all right.
apologize.
We're talking about 5133 wages.
And the question, what would you,
Just how we came to that number, which was the increase in the union.
absolutely. Well, there
contract.
was, based upon their contract, of course, they had a wage increase. And I know there's one due for this fiscal year we're discussing. I wasn't prepared for that question. So that's contractual. The wages that you see in the budget that I submitted includes that increase. Let's see. I think I did make a note that the wages for fiscal year 24 went up 3.7%. And I believe that's the backup I had submitted. So that includes all the officers. And coming to their wages, I have to determine, that includes their salary, holiday, sick time, training, backfills. It includes educational incentives, their stipends. I'm missing anything there, Chief. Pretty much their right of first refusal for overtime. I don't know if you have a specific question about the wages, but the increase in their wages is included in this budget. I already have a salary schedule for that. That was given to me by Ninotchka.
Yeah.
Fiscal year 24. So that's where that information comes from. The
And
only
one-
changes I didn't make was for the chief, myself, and the lieutenant. Those were level funded.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
one major change to the union contract, they've gone to a 2-person minimum. So
That's right.
what we're also finding is we're coming into a large increase of force-ins to fill that second person, which in the past we didn't have to unless there was special circumstances. But just so far, I think we've already forced in 53 people for the first half of the year for FY23 because of somebody leaving, somebody out injured, whatever it was. Yeah, we're up to 53 times so far. So that has a big hit on our overtime.
Thanks for bringing that up. So for the uninitiated, like, can you say more about what a force-in is, and also what is this, like, what's the basis of the 2-person requirement in the contract?
Sure. So every shift has to have 2 people on, a patrolman and a sergeant, whatever it is, has to have 2 people on the shift. Now, there are some special circumstances like Monday to Friday when myself or the lieutenant are on. and the SRO on, we may not have to fill the 2-man minimum. On holidays, we don't have to fill the 2-man minimum, but every shift, so the day shift, evening, and the midnight, pretty much generally have to have 2 people on the shift per contract. So what happens is somebody calls out sick, and nobody takes it for first right of refusal or our reserves. Then we go ahead and we call up the number 1 person on the forcing list, and we tell them they've got to come in and work.
Okay. Any other questions on wages before we talk about wages overtime? I know we talk about this every year, but can you just remind us of how you kind of think about budgeting for overtime?
Sure, I can pick up on that. How I come to overtime is, and if there's ever an open shift, it goes to right of first refusal. It's part of their contract. 50% to the reserve officers go out at the reserve rate, and then the remainder 50% is broken into 30% officer, 20% sergeant, because the wage levels are different. So the right of first refusal brings me that all those monies that's the backfill for all the open time that's available. We have officers out sick. That goes, bear with me a second here. So I just have a look at, but that would be vacation time, sick time, holidays, personal days. Officers have 32 hours of in-service that has to be backfilled. They go, anything from seminars, training. That's just the right of first refusal. Now, we also have an overtime training budget of hours necessary for firearms qualifications, taser training, CPR, AED, in service, of course, I've already brought that up, and first responder. So between the firearms instructor, the training summaries that I've already talked about, we have 4 SINs that the chief has already described. I do budget 480 hours of 4 SINs, but at this point, without looking at what we spent, put out for hours right now, I'm not sure how, the differences on that one. But however, that 4 SIN of 480 hours, I do have in my overtime budget right now for fiscal year 24. And I did the math really quick. So we also have court hours. And then I budget for if the officers are pulled into court, it's typically at overtime. So that I budget hours for that. I have unplanned overtime for investigations where we have to bring in another officer to do investigations for the department. And then, of course, we do traffic enforcement. There's a lot of variables there that we utilize overtime into, and those numbers are typically, those hours, I do tend to keep those consistent. I don't increase them at all for no reason at all. It's based upon the need of the department that we're currently in, and we kind of just put that into the next year budget to make sure that we have a balance of running the department fluidly. So unless there's a specific question about overtime,
I'll see if anybody has specific questions.
Because you have to consider that they have a pay increase also. So if that is already incorporated into the budget, so that will increase the overtime off it also. So that's a no-brainer there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll open it up to questions from the rest of the committee on this one. Not seeing any. All right, well, thank you for that explanation. And like Ninotchka said, what we're going to do is we'll hold off on approving salary and wages tonight, just because we know the numbers are going to change. But then from this point forward, starting with hired services, I think all of this stuff we can vote on tonight. So you know, honestly, for the most part, it looks like you did what we always ask, which is to level fund. We made a change in the gas line just based on what we thought the increase might be. I think that looks reasonable based on your actuals year to date so far. And then for the cruiser purchase, it looks like you're anticipating an increase of $7,000. So do you want to speak to that, Chief?
Yes, definitely. We went out and did our usual, go to MHQ, get our cruiser quote, and they warned us right off the bat that the prices were going up. And like the gas, the heating, oil, it all circles around, and now we're paying more for a cruiser. So that was the increase for all the equipment, everything, the cruiser, the camera, everything in there, everything went up. And unfortunately, that's the same car that we would be getting, well, as soon as it's built, that we're getting this fiscal year. It's the same car. It's a Ford hybrid. We're trying to stay along that line. And no matter what we were going to quote, we even looked at higher and lower models to see what we could get for better, and there was nothing. They were all going up. So it's just a cost of doing business increase.
Do folks have questions about any of the elements of this budget? I didn't necessarily want to ask Lorraine to walk through every single line because we did it last year and basically everything except for the cruiser is level funded. But if there are specific questions, let's get them out now. I'm looking. So Chief, can you remind me, is this going to be the second or the third year that we did a hybrid?
This will be the third.
And just, can you let us know, is that working out? Are they performing to the standard that you would expect?
Well, the first one took 13 months to get. And I don't have the second one yet. It's all supply and demand, chips, you name it, parts not being available, equipment not being available. It's like everybody else. If you wanted a Dodge Ram 1500, I could have that tomorrow, but we don't want those. And yeah, I think the car is sitting at MHQ, but they don't have all the equipment, and they're not going to start until every piece of equipment is ready to be installed. So yeah, it's a great car. I can't really give you any specific numbers because it hasn't been on the road long enough to really give you a whole rundown of everything.
Yep. But you do think you'll probably spend last year's 53,000 before the end of this fiscal year?
FY23, yes.
Yeah.
That car is just waiting to get built. And I'm hoping to have that in the next month or so. Usually we have those July 1. By July 1, I know I'm getting the car by the end of July. Earliest would be the start of August. But just because of the supplies of not being able to get parts, this is where we're standing. This is where we are.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? No. Okay. So is there a motion to approve the police department budget aside from the salary and wages lines?
I move we approve the police budget aside from salary and wages.
I second that.
Okay. Roll call. Bob.
Aye.
Craig.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
Greg.
Aye.
And I am a yes as well. Okay. I mean, somebody jump in if I'm forgetting something, but I think we're good with police, right?
I believe so.
I mean, you have nothing, you have no capital requests this
No.
year.
No articles, nothing. Unless I did want to get a drone, but I didn't write it up in time.
That's true.
Gosh, that would be pretty cool. All right. Well, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you both for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
All right.
very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Okay,
Good
take
evening.
care. Okay. Well, I know it's 8 o'clock. Thanks for bearing with us. We do have some advisory committee business to get through, especially approval of minutes. Before we did that, though, I just wanted to touch briefly on the email that I sent y'all last week about, so I have decided to run for the remainder of Emily Winter's term on the select board. So that would be the 2 years left in her term. And the reason I wanted to bring that up in the advisory business portion of our meeting is because, listen, there are obviously no guarantees about getting elected, but the way that our bylaws are written, if I were elected, I would have to resign from advisory immediately. And so, which isn't to say like I couldn't help out explaining things, but there are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that the chair is kind of responsible for. And so I was thinking it would make sense for us to just kind of share some of that, or for me to share some of those responsibilities with folks over the course of the next few months. And so things in particular that I'm thinking of is I'll try to be a lot better about telling you how I build a lot of the underlying data for our advisory committee statement. And I'll share those spreadsheets and stuff because right now they just kind of sit on my computer. And just things like that. And I want to say again, if anybody's interested in kind of stepping up to the plate, just start thinking about it, because you get to spend a lot of time with Ninotchka. There's nothing better than that.
I don't know if that's a positive or a negative, Brian.
No, it's the best. I love Ninotchka. She's great. She's a lot of fun. And okay, so we have a bunch of minutes to get through. Let me just, I put them all in our folder for tonight. So just going to go through them one by one. These are the minutes for our October 18th, 2022 meeting. I just made a couple small edits, which I can send to Bill or Bob. But apart from that, these look good to me. Does anybody want to make a motion to approve the October 18th minutes?
I move we approve the October 18th minute.
I second it.
Actually, you know what? Sorry, I'm going to pause. Why don't we review all of the minutes and then we can just make a motion to approve all of the ones we reviewed? That'll be more efficient. So I'm sorry about that. All right, so we've reviewed the October 18th minutes. If anybody has questions or edits, say so now. Otherwise, I'll move on. Okay. These are the minutes for November 22nd. Again, it was a pretty short meeting. Does anybody have any edits to these? Nope. Okay. Then we have, I'm about to share our December 20th minutes. This was a long meeting where we did our run through of the budget. I think those were Bill's. So thank you for some good minutes there, Bill. Right? That was Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
Any edits or questions about those? Nope. Okay. Next, we have the minutes of our first meeting of the new year, January 10th. These were also a long set of minutes. Thank you to our co-secretaries. So we did, I don't know if we want to edit this here, but we did ultimately do something slightly different. So maybe should we just edit it to reflect the actual approach?
Yeah, so now we have a hybrid approach going,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Why don't I reword that, something to the effect of, we're going to look at the year-to-date spending and assess whether we should update the electricity costs based on FY22 actuals or FY23, but something like that.
Okay.
And I'll capture it more accurately. And maybe I'll just resubmit it for next week.
I mean, I'm okay with you just making that change. Like, we'll approve subject to you making that change, but you can just send it to Jenny
Okay.
with that change.
Brian, this is Stan. Just a question. Did you ultimately decide that at that meeting? Or was the what you're saying that needs to be changed decided at a subsequent meeting?
Well, it wasn't. It was that the actual approach changed at a subsequent meeting, and so although the decision at that meeting I think is pretty accurately captured, we kind of departed from it upon further consideration.
But at another meeting,
Yeah.
then you shouldn't change those minutes. You should leave the minutes for what they're worth, and then at the meeting you made the change, you should state it in those minutes that you changed the assumptions. But you shouldn't reflect a future meeting in a past meeting minutes.
Okay, we'll have, you know what, why don't we all right, let me pull up the next set of minutes then, just to see what's in there for that.
If we want to just hold on these, I can go back and review the recording and just make sure whatever we settled on that day is what's in those minutes.
Yeah, why don't we do that? And then let me just share the 117. I think what we'll do, we actually should have the 117 minutes a little bit more specific on this point too, because we don't specify which fiscal year we're talking about. So maybe we can just hold off on both of these and approve them at next week. Is that okay?
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll make that change in those 117 minutes.
Yeah, and I'll send the email. I can send you guys an email with the notes in that second spreadsheet that we looked at that 117 meeting, so that for you, Bill, it would just be a matter of, I think, just cutting and pasting that.
Yes, please do.
Okay. All right. So then it looks like what we actually need is a motion to approve October 18th, November 22nd, and December 20th minutes.
I move we approve those 3 sets of minutes.
I second that.
Okay. Roll call. Bob.
Aye.
Craig.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
Greg.
Aye.
And I am also a yes. Okay. Long night. Anything else before we adjourn from anybody?
Yeah, Brian, it's again, Stan, maybe I misunderstood something you said just a bit ago. After you announced that you're running for selectman, did you say that you need to resign immediately?
No, if elected.
If
like
elected,
upon,
yes, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I misunderstood. I thought you said you were gonna resign now. No, you can only serve on one body, so yes, it's if you get elected.
Yeah.
You have to resign. Okay, great. So I misunderstood.
Okay. Yeah. Bye, guys. See you later.
Feet don't fail me now.
Yeah. Anything else before we adjourn? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
All right. All in favor, say
Second.
aye.
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 Yeah. All right. Good night,
night,
folks.
everybody.
Thanks,
All right,
Ninotchka.
thanks. Good night.